All right, Journey Church, it is time for the Word of God. Pastor Peter Jones is about to deliver a word that will be applicable to your life and your daily walk. Enjoy.
We are in the second part of a series that we started last week. We're in the second part of a series, and what we talked about last week, we said God has given us a word. Each year, God gives us a word as a church to focus on, and this year, the word is build. The word is build. And we're talking about building relationships with others, making sure that we're building upon the foundation and the relationships that we have. So sometimes when we're building relationships with others, it needs a complete overhaul. It needs a complete reconstruction. And so some of the things and some of the relationships that you currently have, you're saying, yeah, right now I can see the person's face flash before my mind on the relationship that I need to rebuild, reconstruct, to start on over again. So that's one of the things we talked about, relationships, not just relationships with family members, but also relationships with our jobs. Maybe there's a boss, there's a person in the workplace that you need to start rebuilding and re-cementing a relationship with, hitting the reset button with. There's also relationships within our community. What are those things that we're going to build upon within our community, making those proper connections? So we're talking about this year is a year that God is saying He wants us to build. And not only upon the church, we're not talking about building a new building, but also partnering with the global church, partnering with those that are in different ministries, different places. That's why we're going to the Monroe Temple this Friday. We're going to be celebrating Martin Luther King Day, but they asked us to speak, and I'm telling you, we came here Thursday night, and members from the Monroe Temple were here, and I had to get them to get a little soul. So somebody said, Michael, sit over here laughing. I said, we're gonna appreciate the diversity that we bring. And so they were singing one song, and I was like, that's a beautiful song, but can I just tweak it a little bit? By the time they were all clapping their hands, they were up on it. I said, that's it now. We got it now. So come on out on Friday night at 7:30 at the Monroe Temple. We will be fellowshipping with them, and it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good time. All right. So that's one of the things that God is encouraging us to do, is to partner with other churches. In fact, we had members of the clergy from the community, various churches in the community, the Catholic Church, Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church. We also had the Islamic Center here in Monroe. They all came here this Tuesday, and we meet every other month, and we're starting to talk about things that we can do to build and demonstrate and to lead our community in unity. You know, because this world, our community is so divided, and things are so divisive in our land. And we, as members of faith, we can help our community come together and build upon what we know God is saying. God is love, and we want to demonstrate His love throughout the land. And I don't care what they believe. The fact is, we can all agree on that. We can all agree that God is love, and that we can exercise and demonstrate His love, first of all, with each other, and then broadly within our community. So that is what we're doing, and we're trying to build upon those connections. So that's what God has told us is the word for this year. And we also went a little bit further. We started to go through, what does it look like to build? What does it look like to build upon, or to go forward and to develop or construct something new? And first thing we said is you need to know where you are. All right? You need to know where you were. Let me go there first. Where you were. Then you need to know where you are, and we'll talk about that today. And then we need to know where we're going. So where you were. So when we talked about where you were last week, we actually focused on all those things in life. I was talking about how when we were building in 2019 and reconstructing this facility here, one of the things that we kept doing when we walked the building and we were preparing to put everything in its place, a lot of times we were making decisions based off of where we were versus where we are going. And we were stuck a lot of times. We moved into this building, and the volunteers came in, and they started tearing down and breaking up. And every day, every Sunday for the first month, I started seeing things that should stay out was getting packed up as if we were a mobile church still, as if we were going to be breaking things down and moving again. And so they were breaking things down, packing things up, and it's like you're responding, you're acting based off of where you were, not where you are or where you're going. And I said, when you pause for a moment, you start to think, you say, what are those things that I have brought into my life that God is trying to move me forward? I want to go. I've been praying for something better, and I'm still stuck where I was. I'm still stuck on something in my past, and I've allowed it to come into my present, and I'm smuggling into my future if I'm not careful. And God is saying that that thing that you have, that you're holding on to, that you're bringing with you, you're comfortable with, it's something that you're familiar with, it's called your comfort zone. And I told you last week, I gave another example about Maria and I, that when we got together, there was a lot of things that I came with, a lot of baggage concerning my own religious perspective, what I thought spirituality was, and what it meant to be spiritual. And I was bringing that with me, and I'm holding on to these things, and these things weren't necessarily truth. They were just things I was comfortable with. Things I was comfortable with, and I grew accustomed to, and I liked. And I would go to, I remember when we were dating, I would visit her at her church, and I would go to her, I was like, man, you ain't having church. Because I was used to the way I had church. And those things are things that I was comfortable with, but not necessarily where God wanted me to be. And so I had to reorient myself. And if we're not careful, we'll start bringing those things based off of where we were into our future, into our present. And we used a scripture last week that we're going to continue on today. That will really clarify what God is saying. And this is a story where Abraham and Lot were on a journey together. God had originally called Abram at the time. He told him to leave his family, leave his people, his kinfolk, and he says, go to a land that I'm going to show you. And so Abraham got up, he picked up his wife with him, and he got his nephew with him, and he dragged him along, and they left to go to a place where God was going to show them what he wanted for Abraham's life. But in the meantime, as they were traveling, they started to amass a great amount of wealth. And Lot started gaining wealth, and Abram was gaining wealth, and eventually their people, their servants, started fighting amongst themselves. And so Abram decided, he came up with a solution. He says, you're self-sufficient, you're on your own. He says, I want you to go out, I want you to look and see which way you want to go, you and your men want to go. He says, choose whatever direction you choose, I'm going to choose the opposite direction. You go left, I'm going to go right. You go right, I'm going to go left. And so Lot went out and he saw this great land and he says, this is where I'm going. And he went in that direction, and Abram went a different direction. And this is where the story picked up last week when we began. And when we talked about, we says, after Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot left, the Lord spoke. And we just focused right there last week because this is important. It's important for us to know that we have lots in our life that need to go. Sometimes we can't hear what God is saying for us because we're carrying our lot. And Lot needs to go. Turn to someone and say, Lot need to go. What is the lot that is in your life that you've been holding on to, you've been bringing with you? It needs to go. And it's the familiar thing. It's a familiar thing. Your mother may have cooked a turkey or cooked chicken a certain way, and you've been fighting and arguing. You're like, what are you talking about? You've been arguing. Get over it. Let Lot go. You grew up and your household was oriented in a certain way, and you think that the man has to make all the money. Let Lot. It may be that it's your turn to stay at home and watch the kids. Let Lot go. Y'all didn't know I was going there this morning, huh? Like, you didn't say that last week. See what a good night's sleep gets you? We need to let Lot go. Lot is the symbol of all that is familiar that is attached to us. Lot is family. Sometimes you're letting your family influence your family. Let Lot go. It's an old model. It's an old mindset. It's something that you are smuggling in. And God is saying, this is affecting your destiny. This is affecting the next generation that I'm trying to have you meet that next generation, to go into something new. But you keep holding on to Lot. But when Lot had left, God started speaking. God, I want you to do this. God, I want you to do that. I can't hear from you, God. What are you holding on to that need to be gone out of your life? This is so important. So we said last week, do you love what's next more than where you were? Do you love what's next, what's coming next, more than where you were? Because this is the thing that I think prevents us. Sometimes we sit there and go, I don't even know what's next. But if you trust and you believe in God, and we're going to get there. We're going to work that all out for you. But you may not know what's next. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But I need to trust in God and whatever God has for me. Abram only heard to leave and go to where I'm going to show you. He didn't know what was next. He didn't even know when he was going to get there. But he had to trust God enough more than where he was. We also said, if you want something in your life you've never had, you'll have to do something you've never done. You got to let go of Lot. So we said last week at the end, we said, what is the familiar thing that you need to let go of? What is the Lot that you need to let go of so that you can embrace what God has for you? So that was last week. You ready for this week? We're going to continue building where you were. We're going to go to where you are. Next week, we're going to go to where you're going. We're going to build upon that. So let's get there. So where we were and where you are. Can I continue with that verse in Genesis 13 and 14? That's where we're going to be focused on. Let's continue with that verse. It says, the Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are. He says, look around from where you are. So we talked about Lot being from where you were. Now, God is saying, now, Abram, look around from where you are. In other words, look out. Visualize a preferred future that I have for you. He says, I want you to look out. What happens so often is we spend all of our prayer time asking God to do stuff based off of where we are. Our current situation, our current circumstance, our wherever it is that we're focused on. Lord, my child, you need to do something about my child. Give them direction. Based off of where you are, you're focused on their current behavior, their current situation, your current situation, and saying, hey, God, this is what I want you to do right now for me based off of where I am. where I am. And we spend a whole bunch of time focused on that. We're consumed with correcting where we are right now. And I truly believe, and as God was saying to Abram, is that God was more concerned about where he wanted to take Abram than where Abram was currently. But yet, we spend and we think that God should be consumed with where we currently are, our current circumstance and situation. And he cares. He does care for you, and he understands where you are. But he doesn't want you to be stuck where you are. He doesn't want you to stay where you are. I used to work in a prison. When I started my career out, I worked in Otisville Federal Correctional Facility as a correction officer. And people would come in, it's an administrative prison. People would come in, and I'm sitting here going, they're so focused, even when they're about to be released, they're so focused on decorating the walls with magazines and stuff like that, decorating their cell, the walls, with where they are right now. They're not thinking about developing skills and getting a skill set, a mindset change about where they're going. They're just focusing on surviving where they are. And I'm wondering how many of you are so stuck on where you are, you're so hyper-focused on where you are that that it has imprisoned you and you can't get out of that. You can't look up and see anything different. One of the things I tell people all the time is that, and I tell leaders especially, is that you need to get off of the dance floor and get into the balcony. You see, because when you're in the dance floor, everything looks the same. Everybody looks like they're doing the same thing. But when you get up on the balcony, you could see so much clearer. And this is what God is telling Abram. He says, look out. I want you to look at and get a different perspective. Visualize a preferred future. See something differently. This is key. Because when we talk about vision for your life, I don't know what's next. Have you stopped looking at your current situation and start looking out? Do you know when you're focused here, everything is a problem? I could easily, at the journey, as a leader, I can easily just focus on what's going on today. What's going on right now, this week? What's all the things that's going on and happening right now? And I can't see anything else. I will never see what God has for people outside this building. Because, in fact, you've probably been to a couple churches that's been so hyper-focused on just what's going on right here that they don't look at anything that's happening out there. And we're disconnected because we can't even see the preferred future, what God has for people outside these walls, because we only worry about taking care of what's in here. God has never called us to do that. Where are you focused? Where's your attention? Visualize a preferred future. He goes, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had departed from him, look around from where you are. And this is what he says to him. Look to the north and south, east and west. He says north, south, east, and west. But Lord, where do you want me to go right now? What direction do you want my feet to start moving in? He says, no, I want you to look north, south, east, and west. You see, we tend to want to fixate God or position God or to move in a specific direction. We want to just give me the how I'm to make my next step. We're so focused on the how that we haven't even got a clear mind the what God wants for us first. We're ready to move, and what we really need to do is pause enough so that we can get a clear perspective of what he has for us. And we're sitting there going, well, Lord, you said look north, and we stopped there. But he didn't tell him just to look north. You see, we narrow our options down when we're looking one direction. God is saying, yeah, that's just the first step. That's look north, look south, look east, and look west. He says, I have more for you. I want you to have a global vision, not just a local perspective. One of the things I think my first year here pastoring at the Journey, I preached a sermon called Trifocal Vision, and it was about the owl. I don't know, some of you may remember that, but it was a while ago, but it was about the owl, and the owl sits up high in the tree, and the owl can turn around, and he can look north, south, east, and west, and he's perched up on the top of a tree, and he has the ability to turn his head around and just look north, south, east, and west, and his eyes are so sharp that he could see with such acuity in distance so far away. But not only that, his vision is such that he can look long term, mid-term, and he can see a mouse running from far away coming right up. He doesn't have to move. He can just sit there and just watch it as it scurries across, and he can just see things moving long term, mid-term, short term. He has the ability to look 360. He has the ability to focus his eyes and look at different points and vantage points. And I wonder how many of us are so focused just on right here. We're just looking at what's coming into the next 2 months, what's coming in the next 6 months, maybe even a year. Some of us is just about the day-to-day thing, so I just skipped you for a little bit. But this is where we are. But we need to be looking so much further. We need to look so much further, because when we get a glimpse and it becomes clear on the global vision that God has for us, it begins to expand our options. We want to narrow our options down quickly. But no, God says keep them open. See all the possibilities. See the God-sized dream that I have for you. We're so busy on what's the next thing. No, first, look at all the possibilities. Look at all the possibilities that your God has for you. Expand your vision. Expand the options that are available to you. Start noticing those things. Be mindful of the multifacetedness of God. When we begin to expand our options, it begins to allow us to partner and to integrate with people and to bring people alongside with us and say, I know I only can do this, but because God has shown me all that he has, I know I need people like you to partner with me, and I need people like you to partner with me, and because this is the only way we're going to be able to accomplish what God has. It's not just with me alone. God works in a globe with a global mindset, not with a micro focus. He's focused on the big picture, and a lot of times we can get there too. We're so focused here that God is saying, I'm positioning and bringing people into your life that you are discarding, but it's for your global perspective, for the bigger picture that I have in store for you. He says, I want you to be able to start integrating your decisions, intertwining them, making it interwoven with others and bring them along. I sit there and said to God, I've been praying for talent and for leaders and for different things, and God says, you know what? What are you going to use them for? They're going to come and you're just going to let them sit there, all this talent? Because you haven't seen the big enough picture. Your vision is not big enough for them to see themselves in that vision. God, I want you to do it, but your family can't, it may be for you, and you're still focused on your career, and you're saying, God, I just want to move into the right job, and I want to make the right decision concerning money, and it's so narrow that your family can't even see themselves in that. You going alone. I told you that a while ago that my family sat down when Peter was still in elementary school. I think Alexis was still in elementary, Peter junior, and I think Brianna was the only one in junior high. And we sat down, and I took them through a workshop. And I said to them, what do you want your family to be known for? I said, if something was to happen to a member of your family or even to you, I said, what do you want your friends to say about you? And we started getting one words, and Peter was saying the words. I don't even think he could write it, but we would say it and write it. He would say something, and we would write it down for him. And we were going on, and these are all the things, and all the words came together, and we started narrowing it down, and prioritizing the words, and we started getting the words concise, and basically we're integrating their various points, their various perspective of our family, and I'm integrating it into a one-sentence theme for our family, a model for our family. And so what we did is we narrowed it down and we said we're going to be faithful to God and we're gifted to serve. We're faithful to God and that we're gifted to serve. It was faithfulness and giftedness that just kept coming up in different forms. It didn't say, you know, the kids didn't say faithful, right? The kids didn't say that. But when it came down and we synthesized all it was that they were saying, what it really resonated was it was faithful to God, gifted to serve. And everything now that we did as a family, are we being faithful to God and are we being gifted to serve? Are we using our talent, skills, and ability, anything that God has brought into our lives, our resources, so that we're gifted to serve others? Everything and our vision cannot be extrapolated by anybody that comes alongside. Hey, you know what? You got to be gifted to serve. You got to be about serving. You got to be about doing for others. You be mindful of what's happening with others. Anyone who comes alongside us, gifted to serve. Faithful to God. Prioritize God no matter what. What about your vision? What about for your household, for your family? What are you going to be known for? Have you sat down, looked out, looked north, south, east, and west, and said, Lord, what do you have for my family? Our mark that you want to set, our heritage that you want to leave. What should we be? You look at your family, now look at the church family. Where are we? How can we plug in and be gifted and our talents be used for your service? One of the things he's showing us, even as we were moving upon, and he gave us the word to build. He says, Peter, I need you to tap into those talents. And I started picking out people already. I started tapping them on the shoulder and said, I want you to start thinking about how we can go beyond these walls, impact things that are greater, north, south, be in the marketplace. How can we have a presence in the marketplace where we're helping people in the marketplace? How is it that we can be serving people with disabilities? And how can it be that we can be serving people who are struggling with parents with Alzheimer's and dementia? And how can we start looking differently? Because he's not saying just worrying about their spirit. This is affecting people's spiritual development. And he's saying these people are struggling with these issues that are out here. And it may not show itself on a Sunday morning. But when they leave and they go back home at 2 o'clock, they're struggling. Peter, stop looking locally, just looking at building this building and helping people come to understand who I am, but they need to identify that I'm with them in every aspect of their life. And when they go home, they need the same knowledge that God is with them. And that we haven't forgot that the people that he's called alongside, there are talented people in here. I looked at who we have in here. We have doctors, and we have people who are educators, and we have people that are in social service and in healthcare, and we have all these different talents that are here. And God is saying, how are you going to position them to meet a global vision? North, south, east, west. You need to be in media. You need to build up your media capability so that you can reach people that can't even get out I start tagging on people in the Jump Street in our high school and junior high last week. I said, I want you to start learning how to work media back there. I want you to, and I'm start picking them out. I want you to start developing right now. When people may say, well, they're too immature, they're too young. Guess what? When I was when I was their age, we were in church 7 days a week. Well, let me put it, maybe five days a week. All day Saturday and Sunday. And we were doing sound, but we couldn't even play the drums and couldn't play a keyboard. But guess what? The pastor would say, just get up over there and try to do something. And he would just say, I remember I was just learning how to play the trumpet. And Dr. Best, who was my pastor at the time, he would say, just blow a high C. I don't think if I blew an F, he wouldn't know the difference. But guess what? He was saying, I'm going to nurture the talent that you have. Even though you're learning, I'm going to help grow it so that you can be about service beyond just thinking about inside the church. But even when you're doing stuff out there, that you're doing it for the glory of God. We have to think differently. We have to begin to believe that God has a greater vision for us. And we have been narrowly focusing him. And what would it be like if you start taking the chains off of your God and saying, God, show me that thing that's so much greater, so much global, broader than I am. I may not have the capability, I may not have the skill set, but God, show me the possibility. As he shows you the possibility, let's look what he says. See, this is what he does for Abram. So Abraham does not get disheartened and not get discouraged. This is what he says to Abraham. He says, all the land that you will see, I will give it to you. North, south, east, west. Everything you see, I'm giving it to you. You see, we're so narrowly focused, we're only looking for God to give us this piece of the pie. He says, it's all yours. I don't know who I'm talking to today, but somebody needs to understand. You've been sitting there focused so narrowly, God is saying, it's all yours. Everything you see, I will give it. Didn't say that you're going to have to work hard for it, that you're going to have to do. He didn't say any of those things. He says, I'm giving it to you. It's yours. But I'm only looking here. Well, then that's all you getting. I'm only looking south. Well, that's all you're getting. Everything you see, I will give to you. Then he says something to him. Let's look at the next verse. He says in the 17th verse, he says, go. Get up from out of your tent and go. Go walk the length and the breadth of the land. What are you saying? He says, I want you to walk north, south, east, and west. I want you to go and I want you to walk everything that you see. I want you to walk and claim wherever your feet trods, it's yours. Wherever it is that you see. In other words, let me update it for us. We have to sit there and start looking at and begin to map it out and plan it. I don't care if you have to geo-fence that future house of yours and say, Lord, I got my iPhone here and I'm just going to put some barriers around this piece of property because I'm claiming it as mine. He says, I want you to walk the land. I want you to walk it out, map it out, start to plan to receive it. What is your plan to receive the goods that God has already promised to you? This is where we get sidetracked. We don't like the plan. We don't like the plan. We don't like to start start mapping out what is the skills that I need, what is the work that's going to be required, what is it going to look like. We don't want to go there. But can I start planning and walking out what we're going to get? When Maria and I came into this building, it was just 4 walls in here. This wall back here, what didn't exist for some of you that didn't know, these classrooms didn't exist. It was just a yellow building, yellow and blue, and it was just these big walls in here. And Maria and I took out a piece of paper, and we walked in, and we said, yep, we start drawing on a piece of paper. Yep, this could be the nursery, and these could be some classes here. We didn't know the dimensions. We didn't even know the how. Stop asking God about the how right now. Just start planning what you're going to do with what he's going to give you. How am I going to take? Don't worry about all the provision that I have is yours. I'm going to give it to you. Stop focusing on the how. Start looking at what it is that I want you to have. Whew, I'm preaching today. I'm telling you, I'm prophesying to somebody today. But we get distracted. We get distracted by the how. We get distracted by our current situation where we are. We get focused back again. Oh, I see that, and then we start looking at where we currently are. And that becomes a distraction for us. We start hearing people, we start hearing a lot. We start hearing a lot, the thing that we were familiar with. Well, that looks too different than what I was accustomed to. And that becomes a distraction for us and begins to deter us from where God wants us to go. Get the things that only distracts us, it deters us, and it causes us to take detours. You'll get a bill tomorrow. As soon as you get the vision that God has for you to be debt-free, guess what you'll get? A bill tomorrow that you got to pay off. And you'll be sitting there going, good Lord, there's no way I'm going to become debt-free now. And you go on this detour, and it derails you from pursuing and believing the vision that God has set out for you. Know these things are going to happen, that there are going to be distractions. There are going to be things that deter your spirit and wound your spirit along the way. But don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. Whatever it is, God says, I want you to walk the land. I want you to start mapping it out because it becomes clearer for you. You're not just seeing it and never realizing where the border was and where the border is. You begin to see, when he's looking out on north, south, east, west, he's not as clear on where the end point is. But when he walks it out, there are things that you start to try to do, the things that will distract you or put you on a detour that you'll say, wait a minute, that's outside of where I was supposed to be. You'll recognize it easier because you walked it. You measured it. You began to see those boundaries clearer. I tell people all the time, I have people ringing the bell around Christmas, and they're going, could you donate to Salvation Army? They're ringing the bell. And I look at them straight in the face and say, no. And people say, well, that's cruel. No, I know exactly where my money, I have a plan for where I'm going to donate to. I have a plan. I strategize a year in advance on how much I'm giving and where am I giving it to. So that all the other distractions, there's many people I can donate to, but I'm crystal clear on the plan that I've already laid out. Those other things are detours and distractions that may deter me from reaching my goal. You start giving to those things that you'll never hit the goal on where you planned in the first place because you said, well, I gave over here and I gave over here, and now I don't have enough to get to my goal on what I set out in the beginning of the year. But because I walked it, because I planned it, I could sit there and say, no. And people say, well, you're not being generous. I'm probably more generous than you are because I planned it. I'm not being spontaneous. I see people who are spontaneous with their giving, they don't know where their money is going. They don't know how much they're giving. So they think they're more generous than they are. because they were spontaneous. They remember the instant that they gave. But I put out a plan. And because I have my plan, and I'm working my plan, and I walked it out, I know exactly how generous I am. I know it's tough. Can you say the same? It's because we walk the land. When you walk the land, you're saying, God, I'm very clear on what it is that you have for me. God, I'm very clear on what it is that's right and what is not, because I've walked the land. Where is it that you need to walk the vision? You're saying, this is what God has for me, but you need to walk it. You need to evaluate it. For some people, it's a new job. For some people, it's you've been saying, I want to spend more time at home. Well, what does that look like? For me, when I realized that I was spending more time focused on my work and my house was suffering, I started setting a plan. I started to walk it out. I said, every day when I get home, I'm putting my BlackBerry up in and I'm talking, this is my BlackBerry up by my bed, and I ain't looking at it again. I'll get up, and people say, well, your boss is going to be calling. They need things before you get back into work. Yes. I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And instead of taking the hours away from my kids and taking the hours away from spending time with my wife, I'm going to take the hours away from my sleep. When nobody's going to be affected, and I'll take the hours from my sleep, and I'll start focusing on making sure it's completed before the next morning. See, I walked the land. I've walked it, planned it, mapped it out, so that I had a plan to be successful at work and at home. What is your plan? Instead of narrowing it down and saying, I only could do one thing, he says, north, south, look at all the options, expand the options, and then walk it so that you know exactly what it is that you need to do. You can prioritize. So, this year, we're talking about building upon the people, relationships, and in the church. What type of relationship? I told you there's some people relationships that you need to reconstruct, you need to rebuild, walk it out. What is going to look like? What is the best that you can offer? What is the vision that you have that God has given you for that relationship? Have you mapped it out? I'm going to meet with this person every other month. I'm going to meet regularly. I'm just going to sit and listen. I'm just going to be an ear. I'm used to telling, and God is telling me to shut my mouth. So now I'm going to shut my mouth instead of telling my opinion. Whew. What is he saying to you as it relates to the vision that he has for you in those areas of your life? What are the skill sets that, well, I want this job. I see God giving me this job. This is a new area of my career. Well, what are you starting to do right now to map up, to make sure that you're building up the skill set to get it? That you're positioning yourself, you're making the right connections to move in that direction. What are you doing right now to walk the land? I got that quietness again. That knife must be out. Where is it that you need to do better? God is saying, I want you to see broader. I want you to see bigger. I want you to expand those options so that you can integrate decisions. Who are those people that you need to be partnering with? Who are they? Bring alongside to help. Because he wants us to not be stuck on where we are, but he wants to really get to where we're going. He wants us to really be positioned to where we're going to go.
Well, thank you, Pastor Peter, for that powerful word. Journey Church, remember, the word is real, it is living, it is active. So we need to take something from today's message and be deliberate about putting it to use. God bless you.